Joining us live now is Simon Jackman, CEO of the US Study Centre. Simon, thanks for joining us. Firstly, what did you make of Scott Morrison's speech at the Climate Summit? He stopped short of making new commitments.
Yeah, look, it was about what I expected, number one, from the Australian Prime Minister. As we all know, the politics of climate change here in Australia, very, very fraught. And I think the Prime Minister, consistent with the strategy, I think, that has been the Australian government strategy since the election of the Biden administration, is to accentuate the positive. The fact that Australia didn't leave Paris, unlike the US, has stayed in Paris all along and has met its commitments to Kyoto and to Paris. And moreover, a doubling down, if you will, a re-emphasis of the message about how the Australian government sees its pathway being one through technology and innovation. And frankly, Gabriella, not that different from where I think we're going to see the Biden administration land. Very little, in fact, I'd say zero political room for imposing a carbon tax in the United States at this stage. The big key point of differentiation, I think, between where the US is going and where Australia is going is just the sheer scale. The numbers that the Biden administration is talking about putting into supercharging the EV, electric vehicle industry and supporting owners and operators of electric vehicles in the US, just staggering $170 billion over 10 years, dwarfing, just absolutely dwarfing anything, for instance, the Australian government might be talking about in its sort of technology-driven and not a tax or market-based approach to reducing carbon emissions. So about I think as much as the Prime Minister, given the political situation here in Australia, could deliver, but frankly leaving the door open perhaps for further announcements as we get closer to COP in Glasgow in November.
So seeing as the US has set much bigger targets than we have in Australia, what does this mean for Australia's relationship with the US? Do you think there'll be any friction?
Look, no, I don't, on balance. I think, look, you can't underestimate how important climate change is to this administration in the United States. I think we need to come to grips with that. They say they're serious about it. You saw the President of the United States last night say the US, under his leadership at least, is going to aspire to, we'll see if they can actually do it, I think that's really hard, get to a 50% of their emissions off a 2005 baseline by 2030. Incredibly ambitious target for the United States government to set. But at the same time, there is so much going on in the US-Australia relationship at the moment that I don't think the US government is going to let climate change, and Australia being a little slower to get on board, to use John Kerry's language, is going to get in the way of so much that Australia and the US are doing together with the Quad, on the big geostrategic shifts, the rise of China here in the Indo-Pacific, on dealing with a regional response to COVID, on infrastructure, on cybersecurity. You go down the agenda, there are so many important geostrategically relevant points of touch between the two governments at the moment. I think this US government understands full well how delicate the politics of climate change here are in Australia. They will hear Prime Minister Morrison saying, getting a little more receptive to a net zero target. And I think leave well enough alone would probably be the best advice for a US government that is serious about perhaps seeing Australia get its house in order, as they would see it, on climate change. And moreover, here's the key point, Gabriella. It's the power of the US example, as Biden likes to say. When the US, say, goes aggressively in rolling out EVs, and the rest of the world is announcing those targets as well, it's the combination of that groundswell from below in public opinion rather than anything in an overt government-to-government channel, that I think that's going to be the vector of pressure, if you will, or leverage on Australia and on Australian governments.